Margaret Wells' daughter, Sarah, dropped the suitcases in the room and looked around at the nursing home's small space, the single bed, the window, trying to smile at her mother, though her eyes kept darting away. Sarah commented on how nice the place seemed, how the window overlooked the garden and got plenty of sunlight. Margaret remained silent by the door, watching her daughter and then turning her gaze to her son Michael. Both were present. Both seemed anxious. Both clearly wanted to leave. Michael explained they were doing this for her safety, emphasizing she couldn't live alone anymore since her husband had died and she was 70 years old. What if something happened to her? Margaret cut him off, insisting nothing would happen and that she was perfectly healthy. Sarah quickly interjected that this arrangement was still better, pointing out the presence of nurses, doctors, and other people so Margaret wouldn't be alone. They were both lying, and Margaret knew it. She wouldn't be less lonely here. She would be more isolated, but she wouldn't be a burden to her children anymore, which was what they truly wanted. Sarah glanced at her watch and announced they needed to leave, since Michael had a flight in 3 hours. Margaret simply told them to go. Sarah hugged her quickly. Michael did the same, and then they left. As Sarah closed the door, she promised they would call every week, but Margaret knew they wouldn't. The door shut. Margaret stood alone in the room. 3 weeks later, she felt pain in her chest, and a nurse noticed, ordering tests to be done. When the results came back, the nursing home doctor called Margaret to her office. The doctor delivered the diagnosis directly: breast cancer, advanced stage, and without treatment, Margaret had approximately 6 months. Margaret shrugged, saying it didn't matter. The doctor paused, seemingly taken aback by this response, and pressed further about the seriousness of the situation. Margaret clarified that she understood the severity, but didn't want treatment, since her children had abandoned her here, and she was simply waiting to die anyway. The doctor studied her for a long moment, before glancing down at the file and then back up at Margaret, asking if she had been a teacher at Lincoln High School. Margaret confirmed this, and asked why the doctor wanted to know. The doctor's eyes filled with tears as she identified herself as Ashley Chen, explaining she had been 16 years old in 1999 when she stood on the school roof, planning to jump, and Margaret had talked with her for 4 hours and saved her life. Margaret's breath caught. Ashley continued through her tears, reminding Margaret that 25 years ago she had stopped her from dying, and now Ashley would do the same for her. She begged Margaret to accept treatment, promising she wouldn't abandon her. 25 years earlier, on a cold November day in 1999, Margaret Wells had been working as a guidance counselor at Lincoln High School during what seemed like an ordinary day of meeting with students, filling out paperwork, and eating lunch in the cafeteria. She was 45 years old then, having taught for 15 years, and she loved her work because it allowed her to help young people listen to their problems and find solutions. Around 3 in the afternoon, while walking down the hallway, a student ran up to her in a panic and whispered that someone was on the roof. Ashley Chen, and they thought she might jump. Margaret's heart raced, and without thinking, she ran to the stairwell, climbed 3 flights, and forced open the roof door. When she stepped outside, the wind hit her face, and she saw Ashley standing at the roof's edge, looking down. Margaret approached slowly, careful not to make sudden movements that might startle the girl, and called out gently, asking if they could talk. Ashley didn't turn around, but stood there trembling from the wind and fear, telling Margaret to leave. Margaret refused, explaining she couldn't leave as long as Ashley remained there. Ashley was crying silently with her shoulders shaking, saying nobody cared about her since everyone at school mocked her and her parents only fought at home, leaving her feeling like she belonged nowhere. Margaret moved closer until only 2 meters separated them, acknowledging how difficult things were for Ashley and how being 16 was already hard enough without her additional circumstances. She promised these feelings were temporary and that life, people, and Ashley herself would all change. Ashley said she didn't believe her. Margaret admitted she knew Ashley didn't believe her, but asked for a chance to talk, suggesting they go downstairs and discuss things. And if Ashley still felt the same afterward, Margaret wouldn't try to stop her, but for now, they should just talk. Ashley looked at her for the first time, with red eyes from crying and a pale face, asking why Margaret cared. Margaret explained that Ashley mattered, that she was a human soul, a life, and she was only 16 years old, with so much still unseen and unexperienced, and Margaret didn't want to lose her. Their conversation lasted 4 hours there, on the roof in the wind, with Margaret sitting on the ground, and Ashley eventually joining her as they discussed everything. The bullying at school, problems at home, Ashley's feelings of worthlessness, her lack of hope for the future. Margaret mostly listened, occasionally asking questions, showing empathy, making Ashley feel understood. As the sun set, Ashley stood up and moved away from the edge, turning to Margaret and whispering her thanks. Margaret hugged her tightly and promised she would always be there, always listen, and that Ashley was never truly alone. After that day, Margaret met with Ashley regularly, connected her with therapy, reported the bullying to school administration, and provided counseling to Ashley's family. Over the following months, Ashley slowly recovered, growing stronger and more hopeful. When she graduated from high school, Margaret attended the ceremony, and Ashley hugged her, expressing gratitude for saving her life. Margaret asked what Ashley planned to study in college. Ashley mentioned possibly psychology or medicine, wanting to help people the way Margaret had helped her. That was the last time they saw each other. Ashley went off to college, Margaret continued teaching at school, and life moved forward. Margaret worked as a guidance counselor at Lincoln High School for 35 years, helping hundreds of students. But she never forgot Ashley, because that had been her first major rescue, the first time she had literally saved a life. She had been married to Richard for 40 years, and they had 2 children, Sarah and Michael. They appeared to be a good family, taking vacations together, sharing dinners, watching the children grow up and start their own families. But 3 years ago, Richard died suddenly from a heart attack while sitting at breakfast, clutching his chest before collapsing to the floor. He died before the ambulance arrived, leaving Margaret behind alone in their 72-square-meter house. The children were supportive initially, calling every day and visiting on weekends. But gradually the calls decreased, and visits became less frequent. Sarah lived in New York with her own family and 2 children, staying busy. Michael was in Los Angeles, where his demanding job and marriage left him with little time. Margaret remained alone in the house by herself, spending days watching television and occasionally working in the garden, but mostly just sitting and thinking about Richard, the past, and lost time. One day, Sarah called, expressing concern that her mother was living alone and suggesting she might be safer in a nursing home. Margaret initially refused, insisting she was healthy and fine and didn't need help. But Sarah and Michael decided together, claiming it was for their mother's safety, and a month later, Margaret found herself in a nursing home in a small room with a single bed surrounded by strangers. The first week felt horrific, because Margaret couldn't adjust to this new life. Her room was small, the bed hard, the walls thin, and every night she heard the woman next door coughing. The food tasted bland, activities seemed boring, and the other residents appeared very old and mostly sick. Margaret wasn't like them. She was still healthy, still mentally sharp, still vital, but she was here anyway because her children didn't want her. The second week, Sarah called to ask how she was doing. Margaret lied and said she was fine. Sarah seemed happy and relieved, saying they had made the right decision. Margaret hung up and cried. The third week, Michael called, apologizing for not visiting and explaining how busy he was. Margaret listened silently and said, "It was fine." Another lie. Michael promised to visit soon. Margaret knew he wouldn't come. The fourth week, nobody called at all. That week, Margaret felt a strange pain in her chest, but initially dismissed it, though it gradually worsened. A nurse noticed one morning when Margaret winced and asked if something was wrong. Margaret described the pain. The nurse immediately informed the doctor, and tests were conducted. Blood work, mammogram, biopsy. Results arrived a week later. The nursing home doctor called Margaret to the small examination room, placed the file on the desk, and sat across from her. The doctor appeared to be a young woman, seemingly in her 30s, with a serious expression. The doctor explained the situation directly. Breast cancer, advanced stage, metastasized to the liver and lungs. Treatment options existed, including chemotherapy, radiation, and possibly surgery, but nothing was guaranteed. Without treatment, approximately 6 months remained. When Margaret heard this, she felt nothing. No surprise, no fear, no sadness. She simply shrugged and said it didn't matter. The doctor paused, surprised by this reaction, and asked why it didn't matter. Margaret explained simply that her children had abandoned her here. Nobody visited, and she was already waiting to die anyway, so she didn't want treatment. The doctor watched her for a long moment, seeming to want to say something but hesitating. Then she glanced back at the file, looking at the name on top, Margaret Wells, Lincoln High School, retired guidance counselor. The doctor looked up and asked if Margaret had been a teacher at Lincoln High. Margaret confirmed this and asked why she wanted to know. The doctor's eyes began filling with tears as she whispered her name, Ashley Chen, explaining she had been 16 years old in 1999 when she stood on the roof planning to jump. She described how Margaret had talked with her for 4 hours and changed her life. Margaret's breath caught as she remembered that day, that girl, that terrible moment. Now the woman sitting across from her was that little girl, grown up, a doctor. Ashley continued through tears, explaining she had searched for Margaret her entire life, felt grateful to her, and now fate had brought them together again. 25 years ago, Margaret had stopped her from dying, and now Ashley would do the same for Margaret. Ashley pleaded with Margaret to accept treatment, to fight, to not give up, promising she wouldn't abandon her and they would battle this together every day. But Margaret shook her head and refused again, explaining she was too tired and didn't want to live anymore since her children didn't want her. Why should she fight? For whom? Ashley moved closer, took Margaret's hand, and looked into her eyes, reminding her that 25 years ago, she had told Ashley she mattered, that she was a human soul, a life. Now Ashley was telling Margaret the same thing. She mattered, and even if her children couldn't see it, Ashley could. Margaret hadn't abandoned her that day, and Ashley wouldn't abandon her now. Margaret cried then, unable to control her tears because for the first time in years, someone was telling her she mattered. Someone truly cared about her, but she still didn't accept treatment that day, saying she needed to think about it. Ashley agreed and promised to return tomorrow. After that night, Ashley came to Margaret's room every day, not just as a doctor, but as a friend. She brought tea, sat beside her, and they talked for hours. Ashley shared her life story, studying psychology in college, then attending medical school, and specializing in psychiatry. She worked here now because she wanted to help elderly people and protect their mental health. Margaret listened quietly, not talking much initially, but gradually beginning to open up. She shared her own life, Richard's death, her children's distance, the loneliness, the feeling of abandonment. She explained why she didn't want to live, because she had no purpose anymore, and nobody needed her. Ashley listened patiently, showed empathy, but also challenged Margaret, asking if she truly wanted to die or just wanted to escape the pain. Margaret paused, thought about it, and realized she didn't actually want to die. She just wanted to escape the loneliness. 2 weeks passed this way, with Ashley visiting daily, talking together, and Margaret slowly beginning to change. But she still hadn't accepted treatment because she was afraid chemotherapy would hurt, her hair would fall out, she would vomit and lose weight. What was the point of enduring all that? The third week, Margaret's physical condition worsened with increasing pain and fatigue and complete loss of appetite. She lay in bed most of the time, unable to get up or move. The nurses began worrying, and Ashley worried too. One night, Ashley came to Margaret's room, sat on the edge of the bed, and watched her for a long time. Margaret's eyes were closed. She had lost significant weight, and her face looked pale. Ashley spoke softly, reminding her of that day, the roof in 1999, and recounting what Margaret had said. You matter, you're a human soul, a life, there's so much still to see. Ashley explained those words had saved her and given her a reason to live. Now she was saying the same words to Margaret. She told Margaret she mattered, and even if her children couldn't see it, Ashley could. Margaret was the reason Ashley was here, the reason she was a doctor, the reason she could help other people. If Margaret died, she would be killing Ashley again. Ashley begged her to please live. For her sake, Margaret opened her eyes, looked at Ashley, and saw her tears. She understood this woman truly cared, truly needed her. Maybe her children didn't want her, but Ashley did. Margaret whispered, yes. Agreeing to accept treatment, Ashley cried with joy, hugged Margaret, and thanked her. Margaret cried too because for the first time in years, she felt like she belonged somewhere. The next day, a treatment plan was prepared. Aggressive chemotherapy, radiation, pain management. Ashley was there for every step, explaining side effects, preparing Margaret, offering support. The first chemotherapy session was terrible as Margaret vomited for hours with dizziness and body tremors, but Ashley stayed beside her, held her hand, stroked her hair, and whispered encouragement about her strength and how she had saved Ashley and would now save herself. Weeks passed. Treatment continued. Margaret's hair fell out and she lost significant weight and became very weak. But Ashley came every day, never gave up, never abandoned her. The second month went somewhat better, as Margaret's body began adapting to the chemicals and side effects lessened slightly. Ashley took her to the garden in a wheelchair where they sat in the sun and talked. One day, Margaret asked if Ashley had a family of her own. Ashley explained she was married. Her husband Jason worked as a software engineer. They didn't have children yet, but wanted them. Margaret asked what Jason thought about all these visits. Ashley smiled and explained that Jason was supportive and understanding, even wanting to come meet Margaret himself. Margaret felt surprised by receiving so much attention, no longer accustomed to it. In the third month, something unexpected happened. Sarah called. She had heard about her mother's cancer, learning about it from one of the nurses, and asked why Margaret hadn't told her. Margaret explained quietly that Sarah was already busy and she hadn't wanted to be a bother. Sarah fell silent, understanding her guilt and apologized. She asked if she could visit. Margaret replied coldly that she could if she wanted. Sarah came that weekend and Michael came too. They saw their mother thin, hairless, pale. They felt shocked, cried, apologized. Margaret accepted their apologies, but without feeling, because they had come too late. Ashley was there that day and met Sarah and Michael. Sarah asked who she was. Ashley explained she was a doctor managing Margaret's treatment. Sarah thanked her, but Michael noticed something seemed unusual. Ashley wasn't just a doctor, she was much more than that. Their way of talking, their looks, their closeness resembled a family. He asked how they knew each other. Margaret told the story. 1999, the roof. Ashley at 16, suicide, rescue. Sarah and Michael listened in shock, not knowing this story. Ashley added how her life had changed, how she became a doctor, and how she owed Margaret. She explained she came every day and that Margaret was never alone. Sarah felt guilty in that moment, realizing a stranger cared more for her own mother. Michael felt the same. They promised to visit more often, but Margaret knew they wouldn't keep their promises. And she no longer cared because she had Ashley. The fourth, fifth, and sixth months passed slowly, with treatment continuing and Margaret fighting every day. Ashley was always there, not just as a doctor anymore, but as a friend, almost like a daughter. In the seventh month, scans were done, and they waited for results. Margaret felt afraid. What if it hadn't worked? What if the cancer had grown? When Ashley received the results, she was smiling and came to Margaret's room excitedly, explaining the tumor had shrunk 60%, metastases had stopped, and liver and lung function had improved. Remission had begun. Margaret couldn't believe it and cried with joy, hugging Ashley and asking if it was really true. Ashley whispered, yes, confirming she was getting better, but they needed to keep fighting. That night, Margaret lay in bed, thinking about her life. 7 months ago, she had been waiting to die. Now she was living. 7 months ago, she was alone. Now she had Ashley. Maybe her children had abandoned her, but fate had given her a new family. In the 8th month, Ashley asked Margaret a question. Had she thought about leaving the nursing home? Margaret felt surprised and asked where she would go. Ashley explained she had a guest room in her house and wanted Margaret to live with her. Margaret looked at her in disbelief, asking why Ashley would do this since she wasn't her mother. Ashley smiled through tears, explaining that Margaret meant more to her than family. She said families were formed by choice, not blood. And 25 years ago, Margaret had chosen her on that roof, stopping her from dying. Now Ashley was choosing Margaret and asking if she would live with her. Margaret cried, accepted, and hugged Ashley tightly. A month later, Margaret moved out of the nursing home and into Ashley and Jason's house. It was a beautiful home with a garden and plenty of light. The guest room had been prepared for Margaret, with a comfortable bed, bookshelves, and a window overlooking the garden. Margaret recovered there gradually, regaining strength as her hair began growing back. Ashley and Jason treated her like family, eating dinner together every evening, talking, laughing. Sarah and Michael visited once and felt shocked to discover their mother wasn't at the nursing home. Margaret explained she was living with Ashley. Sarah asked why she wasn't living with them. Margaret looked at her daughter and stated very clearly that they had abandoned her there and forgotten about her, while Ashley hadn't forgotten, making her Margaret's real family now. Sarah cried and apologized again. Margaret forgave her, but said it was too late. Now, and their relationship had changed. Sarah and Michael left feeling sad and guilty. 2 years later, Margaret was 72 years old and still alive with her cancer in remission and regular checkups showing it hadn't returned. She still lived with Ashley, no longer just a guest but part of the family. One evening, the three of them sat in the garden, drinking tea. As the sun set, Margaret looked at Ashley and Jason, feeling happiness and belonging. She whispered her thanks for saving her. Ashley smiled and said no. She was the one who should be thanking Margaret for saving her first, explaining she had simply repaid her debt. Margaret replied that this wasn't a debt, but family. Ashley agreed. This was family. That night, Margaret lay in bed, thinking about her life. She had lived 70 years, spending most of it normally. Marriage, children, career. But the last 2 years had been the most meaningful, because she had learned that families aren't formed only by blood ties. Sometimes you save a stranger on a roof. Sometimes that stranger returns 25 years later. Sometimes that stranger becomes your family. Margaret Wells had been saved from death twice. Once by saving someone else with her own hands. Once by being saved by that same person. And sometimes, just sometimes, life comes full circle.